Bluetti has a bunch of small portable power stations, and I happen to own a good handful of them. Let's talk about them. This is not a device I'm going to talk about in a video. This is my EB70, one of the first power stations that I purchased that was like LiFePo, I believe. One of them, but this thing has been a champ. But let's get into the, what you came to the video for. Now we have a pretty good spread here. We have the AC70, the AC50B, the EB3A, and we also have the AC60. Now let's talk about something they all have in common before we get into the particulars of what separates them, what differentiates one from the other. They all have at least two AC outlets. They are all gonna have Bluetooth connectivity to be controlled via the app. They all have the same style of screen. It's this new kind of more visible screen from Bluetti. The only thing that really differentiates this one from the others is that it has more information on the screen, where it can show AC input and AC output, DC input, DC output, whereas like these just have a combined input, output, input, output. They are all gonna have no power bricks involved in the charging. They all have the AC direct charge situation, some in different locations. This one has a little cover on it. I'm killing my light here about how I angled these joints. My bad for that. These are all gonna have at least up to 200 watts of solar, whereas like the AC70 is a little bit different. It can have up to 500 watts of solar, but everything else can get 200 watts of solar. This one can get 200 watts of solar, but it can just go a little bit higher than the rest of these. They max out at, you get it. And also they are all gonna have some form of UPS, which allows the power to be passed through, bypassing the battery, which is actually real pass-through charging, but don't get me started on that. So they can bypass the battery once they get full, and then you'll see that the power is flowing from the wall past the device into the device. And if you lose power, then these are gonna take over the power. So all very capable. Now let's get into where they differ. And towards the end of the video, I will also tell you who I think these devices are ideal for, in my opinion. What can you do? It's just my thoughts. Some differences first and foremost is how they charge from solar. The two on the left have XT60 connectors. That's the AC70 and the AC50B. And then the two on the right, which is the EB3A and the AC60, are gonna have 8mm connectors. Now Bluetti has kind of transitioned into the XT60 connectors. Going forward, I haven't seen many 8mm with the exception of the AC180, which is getting kind of old in tech standards. These typically have a cover on them. I pulled the cover off of this one because I don't like covers. 8mm here is going to be on the front, and the 8mm on the AC60 is going to be on the side. Weight differences, obviously, that's of no consequence to me, but I'll try and put the weights of each device up on the screen so you can know how heavy these are. I feel like you should be able to carry any of these situations. What's more important is size, and you can see the size difference. I'll also try and put the sizes up on the screen so you can have an idea of how big these are in the dimensions. Let's talk lights. We're still in the same configuration. The AC series are over here, and then I have, well, the AC70 and the AC50B. This is the AC60. This one has a nice diffused light on the back. This one has a light as well, but it's one of these like little rinky-dink flashlight style ones, which are less useful. But Bluetti has pretty much abandoned the lights on these. And there's also a difference between these two. These do not have wireless charging in them, whereas these do. As you can see, they has wireless charging on the top of here and wireless charging pad on the top of the AC60 as well. We'll get to one of the most important differences here in a second, but I wanted to talk about ports. I would say that the AC50 and the AC70 have the ports covered better. This one has two 60-watt USB-C PD ports with one USB-A. I like the idea of having more USB-Cs than A's, but still having an A around for some older connections and all that jazz. Now the AC70 wins it all. It has two 100-watt USB-C ports and then two fast charge USB-A's. This one is a fast charge as well up here. But this one is going to cover you a whole lot better as it relates to the USB-C charging. And then if you don't have a fridge, you can also add more USB-C charging to all of them by just getting a 12-volt adapter and popping it in here. But if you have a fridge, this is a good alternative because it has more ports for more USB charging. Over here, it's kind of a different story. You have one 100-watt, two USB-A's, and then you have one 100 watt here under this flap, and then 2 USB-A quick charge or whatever configuration they're in. So these are very similar. And these are like really pushing and moving forward in the USB configuration. Not having 100 watt here is interesting, so take that into consideration on the AC50B. A couple specific call outs that are kind of one-offs to each device. This one is the only device here that has the 5521 barrel connectors. I love these little connections. I don't use them as much, but when I use them, they're really convenient. And then this one is in a league of its own, the AC60. It's waterproof. So this one came out, was really nice. I like that it's on sale now, or that the price is going down, because when it first came out, because it's such a specialty device, the price was really high on it. And it was hard to justify if you wasn't like a guy who was outdoorsy and all of that jazz. Form factor is a little bit interesting on these. They have the handle built in, which I really like, but this one has the folding handle that can come up, which is fine too. I don't have a preference. I'm just glad that the built-in handle doesn't hang off the back like some other power stations. When you grab it, you still get this like weight distribution that is better, but it goes into this kind of like diamond shape when you're holding it. Whereas like these, with the handle being more center, when you grab them, they're a little more controlled. If you're walking through tight spaces, it kind of matters. If you're outdoors, it doesn't matter as much. It's just what I found. I'm a homeowner. I walk through the house all the time with these power stations, so I can kind of bump into things. AC output on these is going to be pretty close. They're all except for this one at about 600 watts. I believe this one is at 600. This one goes up, it's an outlier here. It has about 700 watts output on the AC inverter. But this is the beast right here. It gives you 1,000 watts on the AC outlet, which is really nice. You can get by with a lot of things with 1,000 watts, especially on this type of form factor. People out in the bush and, you know, whatever, a lot of those little coffee makers and smaller things will use about 700 watts. So you'd have yourself covered pretty good with this type of inverter on the AC70. Via the app control, you can pretty much control how fast these charge. They're all gonna charge really fast. All of them are gonna have some type of turbo charging that you can enable. Turbo charging should be used sparingly in an emergency situation, or if you just need a bunch of power before you head out. Standard and quiet are the other modes. Typically get a little bit lower on the quiet and about the normal for standard. Yeah, they fast charge. Yeah, it's good. Now here's the most important thing you need to be considerate of, which is the solar input difference. Like I said, all of these up top, the AC50B, the EB3A, and the AC60 are gonna do about 200 watts of solar. But then you have the AC70, not only does it dwarf these in solar, it has a higher voltage as well. This one can do 500 watts of solar, and it has a range of the input from about 12 to 58 volts. So you can do 2 panels in series on this device, whereas you cannot use series on these at all. These will have to be doubled up with a parallel configuration, which is fine. They typically have about an 8 amp or 8.5 amp input limit on them. It sucks on paper, but in reality, most panels don't output that high amp anyway. So you kind of get by. You will find yourself hard pressed to get up to 200 watts on the nose, but most panels are not going to put out 200 watts anyway. So these are really like 150, 160 watt input on these three: AC50, EB3A, and the AC60. This joker right here is nice. 700. Oh, I didn't talk about watt hours. Let's talk about watt hours. 760 some odd watt hours on this, about 448 on the AC50B. And then you have this one, the AC60, does about 404, but it has a trick up its sleeve that we'll talk about in a second. And the EB3A is a little bit short on watt hour capacity. It's about 260 some odd watt hours compared to some other devices that'll give you like 300. So this one is really going to be a good solar charge, AC charge, USB with a little bit of AC output on it. It's a nice device, don't get me wrong. The ability to get to 200 watts of solar and then have that 600 watt AC output on the inverter is nice, but you can't store up a lot of power in this. Now the AC60 has another trick up its sleeve that sets it apart with it being waterproof, it can connect to this B80 and it has bi-directional communication and charging between it. The other devices can use the B80 because it has a 12-volt outlet. It also has the ability to charge via 8mm, so you can charge it all of it on its own from solar or from a wall wart. If you have one of those older Bluetti wall chargers, that should work. I haven't tried it, but it should work. These other ones can take power from it, but they cannot put power back into it easily. They will have to charge it through this socket over here. This one does not have a wireless charger on the top, and it has no other means by which to charge, so you can't charge it from AC. This one can be expanded with 2 of these, which is pretty cool. Now, there is the AC2A, which is kind of like the form factor of this, but in the size and less capacity of this. So it's very small, very portable, very similar situation. It's only a 300-watt inverter, but it can still take the same 200 watts of solar into it. I think the EB3A is a good starter. You don't have a whole lot of cash. You kind of want to have something to power maybe your internet and a TV and a lamp in a pinch. You lose power for a few hours. This is a good way to get going. Also with that 200-watt solar input, you can kind of use this day to day. They're all LiFePo. They're all going to have 3,000 cycles of battery, which is about 10 years. So this is a good way to get started. I think the AC60 is more so for outdoorsy people, or for people who charge up outside and forget your power station outside, which I have done. I'm not proud to admit that, but I have done it. I think the AC50B is going to be a good little portable device for people who are going out and about and they need that dual DC charging of these USB-C ports, maybe charge up a couple laptops. It's a good, like, kind of get everything going situation. It still has a 600-watt inverter, then it has the XT60 connector for up to 200 watts. And I think this is a nice kind of middle ground package. The AC70, it's incredibly versatile. I think it's for people who take both home power and on-the-go power a little more seriously, but they still want it in a nice small package. That 500 watts of solar means that you could put this and you could power some serious stuff with this 1,000-watt inverter. So that's good for being out in these streets or for being at home. I'm really impressed with this. You guys expressed a lot of interest in this AC70, especially because it has the more ports, the bigger inverter, more solar, and a little bit larger capacity. I think this one is a nice package. This video was recorded during this shopping season, so there will be links down in the description box. Check those out if you're interested, and let me know what you think. What's your favorite? Would you rather go waterproof or AC70? Would you start off going smaller? Or you're interested in the AC50B? Does the solar input matter to you? AC charging is pretty much comparable. Let me know. Sound off.